The mist lifts slowly from the Norwegian fjord, revealing the curved silhouette of a vessel unlike any other in the medieval world. 80 feet of oak and pine, bent and shaped by human hands, sits ready at the water's edge. As dawn breaks, dozens of figures move around it like shadows, their voices carrying across the still water. This is not just a ship. It is the culmination of generations of maritime knowledge, a vessel that would change the course of European history and carry the Norse people across oceans that others dared not cross. This is the story of the vessels that defined an age, the dragon ships of the Vikings. Before we begin this journey into the Viking Age, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? It's always fascinating to see our community of history lovers spread across the world. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. Every subscription helps us keep exploring the real stories behind the legends. Now let's begin. The world before the coming of these remarkable vessels was one divided by water rather than connected by it. The Roman Empire had fallen centuries earlier, leaving a fragmented Europe where the sea represented danger and isolation. The Mediterranean remained a corridor of commerce and communication, but the wild waters of the North Atlantic and the North Sea were viewed with dread by most seafaring peoples. In England, the Anglo-Saxons had established kingdoms after their own migration, but their ships were primarily coastal vessels, limited in range and capability. The Frankish Empire under Charlemagne stretched across much of continental Europe, but even its power stopped at the shoreline. The waters beyond were a barrier, not a highway. In this world, the Northlands remained mysterious, a cold region of forests and fjords where people lived in scattered communities along coastlines and riverways. These were the Norse, farmers, traders, and fishermen who lived in harmony with the sea rather than in fear of it. Their settlements dotted the coastlines of what we now know as Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, places where the land meets the water in countless inlets and islands. Here, travel by land was often more difficult than travel by water, and boats became not luxury, but necessity. This necessity would become the mother of an invention that would reshape Europe. The Norse people's relationship with the sea was embedded in their cosmology. In their understanding of the world, the great serpent Jörmungandr encircled Midgard, the realm of humans, beneath the ocean waves. Njordr, the god of the sea, winds, and fishing, was invoked for safe passage, while the goddess Ran dragged unfortunate sailors to her underwater realm with her net. The sea was not just a physical reality, but a spiritual one, filled with beings both helpful and dangerous. This deep connection with the waters would shape how the Norse approached shipbuilding, not merely as a technical challenge, but as a sacred craft. In the workshops of coastal communities, shipwrights practiced an art passed down through generations. Their vessels began as ideas, concepts tested against the harsh realities of northern waters. The earliest boats were simple affairs, hide-covered frames or hollowed-out logs that served for fishing or short journeys. But by the 8th century, something remarkable had emerged from centuries of nautical evolution. The Norse shipwrights had developed vessels that combined lightness with strength, flexibility with durability, in ways that no other shipbuilders in Europe had mastered. The creation of a Viking longship began with careful selection of materials. Oak was preferred for the keel, the spine of the vessel, which needed to be strong yet flexible enough to ride over waves rather than cut through them. Finding the right tree was a task that could take shipwrights deep into the forests, searching for a trunk naturally curved at one end to form the stems. Pine was often used for the strakes, the planking that formed the hull, as it was lighter and more buoyant. Ash, strong yet flexible, became the oars and mast. Each material was chosen with intimate knowledge of its properties, how it would behave when wet, how it would flex under strain, how it would age over years of use. The tools of the Viking shipwright were surprisingly simple: axes, adzes, augers for drilling holes, and draw knives for shaping wood. Yet with these basic implements, they achieved remarkable precision. The construction method they perfected was unlike any other in Europe at the time. While Mediterranean shipbuilders constructed their vessels by first creating a frame to which planks were attached, Norse shipwrights worked from the outside in, a method known as shell-first construction. They began with the keel, then added overlapping planks, one above the other, creating the distinctive clinker or lapstrake pattern visible on all Norse vessels. Each plank was split from oak or pine logs using wedges, following the grain of the wood to create boards of remarkable strength and flexibility. These were then shaped with axes and planes until they fit perfectly against their neighbors. The planks overlapped at their edges and were secured to each other with iron rivets clenched over rows, small metal washers, creating a strong, flexible, and remarkably waterproof hull. Only after this outer shell was complete would internal framing be added for additional support. This method allowed Viking ships to flex with the waves rather than fight against them, a crucial quality in the stormy North Sea. The genius of this construction method lay in how it distributed stress throughout the vessel. When a Viking ship encountered a wave, the entire hull would twist slightly, absorbing and dispersing the force. This flexibility was further enhanced by the use of animal hair or wool soaked in pine tar, which was caulked between the planks to ensure water tightness while still allowing movement. The resulting vessel had an almost organic quality, responding to the sea like a living thing rather than fighting against it as a rigid structure. As the seasons passed and the ship took shape, the community would gather to witness key moments in its creation. The laying of the keel was often accompanied by rituals, perhaps a sacrifice to ensure the vessel's good fortune, or the placing of a coin under the mast step for luck. These were not mere superstitions, but reflections of the deep spiritual significance attached to these vessels. The ship was seen as a boundary crosser, moving between the world of land and the world of sea, and as such, it needed spiritual as well as physical protection. The distinctive prow and stern of Viking longships, often carved into animal heads or abstract forms, were not merely decorative. These stems served practical purposes, reinforcing the ends of the vessel while providing attachment points for the planking. Yet they also carried symbolic weight. The dragon or serpent heads were sometimes designed to be removable, taken down when approaching friendly settlements to show peaceful intent, but raised when approaching enemies to strike fear into their hearts. These carved beasts were guardians of the vessel and its crew, spiritual protectors facing into the unknown. One of the most remarkable innovations in Viking shipbuilding was the use of a single square sail, typically made of wool. This sail, combined with the long, narrow hull, gave their vessels an unprecedented combination of speed and maneuverability. The sail was supported by a mast stepped into the keel and secured by shrouds and stays of hemp rope or walrus hide. When the wind was favorable, a Viking longship could achieve speeds of 10 to 15 knots, remarkable even by modern standards. When the wind failed or was unfavorable, or when navigating in confined waters, the crew would take to the oars, seated on sea chests containing their personal belongings. The steering of these vessels was accomplished not with a rudder attached to the stern, as in later ships, but with a steerboard, a large oar mounted on the right side of the vessel near the stern. This placement gives us our modern word starboard for the right side of a ship. The steerboard was operated by a single helmsman who needed considerable skill and strength to control the vessel in rough seas. This simple yet effective steering mechanism gave Viking ships remarkable maneuverability, allowing them to navigate not just the open ocean, but also shallow rivers and estuaries, a versatility that would prove crucial to their success as raiders and traders. The construction of a longship was not a task undertaken lightly. It represented a significant investment of resources and labor for a community. The largest vessels, those capable of carrying 60 warriors across the North Sea, might require the felling of a dozen large oak trees, a precious resource in many parts of Scandinavia. The iron for rivets, typically smelted from bog iron using charcoal, was another valuable commodity. The specialized labor of the shipwright was highly valued, and master builders were renowned figures whose reputation might spread far beyond their home communities. As the vessel neared completion, it would be prepared for its launch with careful attention to ritual and practicality alike. The hull would be treated with a mixture of pine tar and animal fat, creating a waterproof coating that protected the wood from both seawater and the shipworm that could destroy a vessel from within. This gave Viking ships their characteristic dark color, which added to their ominous appearance when they appeared on the horizon. Final preparations might include the installation of oar ports, openings through which the oars would pass, and the fitting of the sail and rigging. The launching of a completed ship was a moment of community celebration and nervous anticipation. The vessel that had been taking shape on land for months would finally meet the element for which it was designed. Wooden rollers would be placed beneath the hull, and with many hands pushing and pulling, the ship would slide into the water for the first time. This moment was fraught with both practical and spiritual significance. Would the vessel float as designed? Would it prove stable and responsive? Had the proper rituals been observed to ensure its good fortune? As the ship settled into the water, adjustments would be made, leaks addressed, and the balance of the vessel assessed before it would be deemed ready for its maiden voyage. The call to maritime expansion that drove the development of these remarkable vessels came from a complex interplay of factors. The growing population of Scandinavia in the 8th century placed pressure on limited arable land. Climate shifts may have made farming more difficult in some regions. Political consolidation under ambitious kings displaced some nobles who sought power and wealth elsewhere. The growing awareness of wealthy, vulnerable targets abroad, monasteries, towns, and trade centers, provided tantalizing opportunities. And the Norse people's deep cultural comfort with the sea made voyaging a natural response to these pressures. The first recorded Viking raid on the monastery of Lindisfarne in 793 CE shocked the European world, not just with its violence, but with its seeming impossibility. How had these northern pagans crossed the treacherous North Sea in numbers sufficient to overwhelm defenses? How had they appeared without warning and disappeared just as quickly? The answer lay in the revolutionary design of their vessels. The longship had made possible what other European powers considered impossible: rapid long-distance sea travel that was not constrained by the need to hug coastlines or wait for optimal conditions. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded the astonishment felt at the appearance of these vessels. In this year, fierce, foreboding omens came over the land of the Northumbrians. The immense whirlwinds, flashes of lightning, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the air. These fiery dragons were likely the dragon-prowed longships, their gilded figureheads catching the sun as they approached, or peoples who had come to see the sea as a barrier protecting them from outside threats. The Viking ship represented a terrifying new reality. The sea was now a highway for those who had mastered it. The meeting of Norse maritime technology with the wider world created a cultural shock that reverberated through European society. Churches added a new line to their litanies: "From the fury of the Northmen, deliver us, O Lord." Coastal communities throughout Europe began building watchtowers and fortifications. The very geography of settlement changed as people moved inland, away from vulnerable coasts and riverways. The psychological impact of the Vikings' ability to appear without warning and disappear just as quickly cannot be overstated. It was not just their ferocity that terrified, it was their mobility, made possible by their ships. Yet the longship was not solely an instrument of terror. These vessels opened new trade routes, connecting Scandinavia with markets from Dublin to Constantinople. The same features that made them effective raid platforms, speed, cargo capacity, shallow draft, made them exceptional trading vessels. Archaeological evidence shows that Norse traders reached as far as the Middle East, returning with silver coins, silk, and spices. The longship became the backbone of a trading network that enriched Scandinavian society and introduced new ideas, technologies, and beliefs. As Norse seafarers ventured farther from their homelands, they encountered challenges that pushed their shipbuilding technology to evolve further. The voyage to Iceland, settled by Norse people from the 870s onwards, required vessels capable of extended open ocean travel. The subsequent voyages to Greenland and briefly to North America demanded even more seaworthy designs. While the sleek longship remained ideal for coastal raiding and trading, a broader, deeper vessel emerged for these transatlantic journeys, the Nar, a merchant ship with greater cargo capacity and better seakeeping abilities for ocean crossings. The Greenland Norse sagas, compiled centuries after the events they describe but drawing on oral traditions, tell of Leif Erikson's voyage to Vinland around the year 1000 CE. This remarkable journey, which brought Europeans to North American shores nearly 500 years before Columbus, was made possible by the Nar. These broader, deeper vessels sacrificed some speed and maneuverability for improved stability and cargo capacity, a necessary trade-off for the extended Atlantic voyages. The Nar could carry livestock, timber, and the supplies needed to establish new settlements in distant lands. The ability of Norse shipwrights to adapt their designs to different purposes and conditions speaks to their pragmatic innovation. The longship itself came in various sizes and configurations, from the small carvey that might be owned by a wealthy farmer for coastal travel to the massive longships that could carry 100 warriors. The Snekka, Skade, and Drakar were other variations, each optimized for particular uses. This diversity of vessel types allowed Norse society to project both military power and commercial influence across vast distances. Navigation presented a particular challenge for Norse seafarers. Without compasses or other sophisticated navigational instruments, they relied on a combination of astronomical observation, knowledge of prevailing winds and currents, and careful attention to natural signs. The position of the sun during the day and the stars at night, particularly the North Star, Polaris, provided basic directional information. Observing the behavior of birds, the color and motion of clouds, and even the smell of the air could indicate the proximity of land. These techniques were passed down through generations of seafarers, creating a body of practical knowledge that enabled remarkable feats of navigation. For longer voyages into the open ocean, Norse sailors might carry ravens on board. When uncertain of the direction to land, they would release a raven which would fly toward land if it was within range or return to the ship if no land was visible. This technique, described in historical sources, represents an ingenious use of natural behavior to solve a navigational problem. Similarly, the Norse sailors' deep understanding of weather patterns allowed them to interpret signs that would be invisible to the untrained eye. The subtle change in wave patterns that might indicate land beyond the horizon, or the shift in cloud formations that signaled an approaching storm. The sagas tell us that Norse seafarers also used a mysterious navigational aid called a solarstein, or sunstone. Modern researchers have suggested this may have been a crystal of Iceland spar, a form of calcite that can be used to determine the direction of the sun even on overcast days by observing the polarization of light. While archaeological evidence for such devices remains limited, the concept demonstrates the innovative approaches Norse navigators may have developed to solve the challenges of open ocean travel. The chronicles and memories preserved in Norse sagas provide vivid accounts of life aboard these vessels. The Saga of the Greenlanders and Eric the Red's saga describe the conditions faced by crews making the perilous journey across the North Atlantic. They speak of storms that threatened to overwhelm the ships, of periods becalmed when provisions ran low, of the tension and cooperation among crew members whose lives depended on one another. These narratives, while composed centuries after the events they describe and undoubtedly embellished in the telling, nevertheless capture essential truths about the maritime culture that made such voyages possible. The archaeology of Viking ships provides a more concrete, if fragmentary, record of these remarkable vessels. The preservation of ships in burial mounds, a practice reserved for the most elite members of society, has given us invaluable insights into Norse shipbuilding techniques. The Gokstad and Oseberg ships, excavated in Norway in the late 19th century, remain among the most completely preserved Viking vessels. The Oseberg ship, built around 820 CE and used in a burial around 834, features elaborate carvings that speak to the artistic as well as technical accomplishments of Norse shipwrights. The slightly later Gokstad ship, built around 890, represents the classic Viking longship in its most refined form, a sleek, fast vessel capable of both sailing and rowing. More recent archaeological discoveries continue to enhance our understanding of these vessels. The 5 Skuldelev ships deliberately sunk to block Roskilde Fjord in Denmark around 1070 include examples of different vessel types, from a small fishing boat to an ocean-going trader. The meticulous excavation and reconstruction of these vessels has revealed details of construction that would otherwise have been lost to history. Similarly, the discovery of ship burials at places like Ladby in Denmark and Sutton Hoo in England, though the latter predates the Viking Age proper, offers glimpses of the shipbuilding traditions that would evolve into the classic Viking vessels. The legacy of the Norse shipwrights extended far beyond their own time. Their influence can be seen in boat-building traditions throughout the regions they settled or traded with, from the highlands and islands of Scotland to the rivers of Russia. The clinker-built construction method they perfected remained the dominant approach to wooden shipbuilding in northern Europe for centuries. Even as larger, more complex vessels emerged in the later medieval period, many retained elements first developed by Norse shipwrights, a testament to the sound engineering principles they had discovered through generations of practical experience. As the seasons turned and the Viking Age progressed, the political landscape of Scandinavia began to change. The loose confederation of chieftains and small kings gave way to more centralized monarchies. Christianity spread throughout the Norse world, bringing with it new cultural influences and power structures. The wild raiding that had characterized the early Viking Age was gradually replaced by more regulated warfare and trade. These changes affected shipbuilding as well, as vessels began to be constructed not just for individual chieftains or communities, but for nascent states with royal ambitions. By the 11th century, the classic Viking longship was evolving into new forms. The Danish king Canute, who ruled a North Sea empire, including England, Norway, and Denmark in the early 11th century, maintained a fleet of vessels that were increasingly specialized for warfare, rather than the dual-purpose raiding and trading of earlier longships. These later warships were larger, with higher sides for protection, and were sometimes fitted with fighting platforms. They represented the transition toward the dedicated warships that would dominate medieval naval warfare in subsequent centuries. The Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, often cited as marking the end of the Viking Age, also represented the last great deployment of the classic Norse fleet. Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, brought a fleet of around 300 longships to invade England, only to be defeated by the Anglo-Saxon king Harold Godwinson. Just weeks later, Harold himself would fall to William of Normandy at the Battle of Hastings. William, though a descendant of Norse settlers in France, had already adopted the more advanced shipbuilding techniques developing in the Mediterranean. The Viking ship, which had dominated northern waters for 3 centuries, was beginning to give way to new designs. The decline of the classic Viking longship came not from any inherent flaw in its design, which remained supremely adapted to its environment, but from changing economic and political conditions. The conversion to Christianity brought new cultural connections with continental Europe. The establishment of towns and trading centers within Scandinavia reduced the pressure for external raiding and trading. The consolidation of European states improved coastal defenses and reduced the effectiveness of lightning raids. As these conditions changed, so too did the requirements for ships, leading to new designs more suited to the emerging medieval world. Yet the achievements of the Norse shipwrights continue to resonate through the centuries. They solved problems of naval architecture that would not be fully understood in theoretical terms until the modern era. They created vessels that were not just functional but beautiful, embodying an aesthetic that valued clean lines and practical elegance. They developed construction methods that perfectly balanced strength with flexibility, weight with buoyancy, in ways that still impress modern naval architects. The enduring legacy of these shipbuilders can be seen in the ongoing fascination with Viking ships. Modern reconstructions have demonstrated the remarkable capabilities of these vessels. In 1893, a replica of the Gokstad ship sailed across the Atlantic to the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, proving the seaworthiness of the design. More recent experimental archaeology projects have further validated the performance of these vessels under various conditions. The Viking Ship Museum in Roskilde, Denmark, maintains a fleet of reconstructed vessels that are regularly sailed, providing invaluable practical insights to complement academic study. Perhaps the most profound lesson from the Norse shipbuilding tradition is how thoroughly they understood and worked with the natural world rather than against it. In an age before scientific theories of hydrodynamics, they developed hull forms that minimized resistance and maximized stability. Without formal understanding of material science, they selected woods whose properties perfectly matched their intended use. Without complex mathematical calculations, they achieved balance and proportion that resulted in vessels of remarkable performance. This intuitive, experience-based approach to engineering challenges offers a counterpoint to our modern reliance on theoretical models and computational design. As we look back across more than 1,000 years to the age of the Viking ships, we see more than just wooden vessels that once crossed northern seas. We see the embodiment of a culture that valued practical skill alongside poetic expression, that combined fierce independence with communal effort, that respected tradition while embracing innovation when necessary. The ships that carried the Norse people across oceans and into history were more than mere tools. They were expressions of a worldview, a way of understanding and moving through the environment that remains instructive even in our technological age. In harbors and museums across the northern world, the curved lines of preserved Viking ships continue to evoke the age when these vessels ruled the waves. Their elegant simplicity, the visible evidence of the shipwright's axe in every plank, the harmonious proportion of their design, all speak to us across the centuries. They remind us that before the Industrial Revolution, before mass production, human hands shaped tools of remarkable sophistication and beauty. The Norse shipwrights, working with simple tools and profound understanding, created vessels that would change the course of history and shape the development of nations across Europe and beyond. The dragon ships of the Vikings, born from the marriage of necessity and ingenuity in the harsh northern environment, represent one of humanity's great achievements in the age before modern technology. They enabled a relatively small population from the edge of the known world to project influence across half a continent and beyond. They connected lands and cultures that had previously existed in isolation. They carried not just warriors and traders, but ideas and technologies that would transform the societies they touched. And in their construction, they embodied an approach to engineering that worked in harmony with natural forces rather than attempting to overcome them, a lesson that perhaps holds renewed relevance in our own age of environmental challenges. The mist settles once more over the fjord. The long ship that began our journey sits at anchor, its dragon head silhouetted against the setting sun. The craftsmen who built it, the sailors who crewed it, the communities that depended on it, All have returned to the earth long ago, but their legacy endures in the vessels they created, in the lands they settled, and in the stories still told of the age when dragon ships ruled the northern seas. As long as humans feel the call of distant horizons and the challenge of crossing open waters, the achievement of the Norse shipwrights will continue to inspire wonder and admiration, a testament to what can be accomplished when human ingenuity engages fully with the natural world.